Good evening, everybody, and welcome again. This is our 10th New South Wales Family Daycare Association webinar for PD in Your Pocket for the series. My name is Elizabeth and I am your facilitator for this evening. So let's get started. So before we begin tonight, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the country on which we meet today. So I know that we are on many different lands this evening with many different traditional owners. I am currently presenting from the land of the Gadigal and Wongal people, and I'd like to acknowledge them and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and culture. And I'd like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. It's really important that we remember that Aboriginal people have been using science, technology, engineering and mathematics way before European people came to Australia. And the picture above is of some of the technology tools that Aboriginal people have used in Australia for many thousands of years. Now, something else I'd like to share with you, I'm not sure if you've seen these images before, but they're images of possibly the oldest man-made structure in the world. And they're in Australia and they're a great example of STEM. So they are the Brewarina fish traps, or as they're traditionally known, the Baimese nunus. So apologies if that pronunciation is a little incorrect. I had to do some research on that one. But there are a series of complex networks of river stones arranged to form ponds and channels that catch fish as they travel downstream. So the traps are located in the Barwon River on the outskirts of Brewarina. And the fish traps work by using stone walls to guide fish that are swimming upstream into holding ponds where Aboriginal people traditionally caught them with their bare hands and then use their spears or block them in the ponds for later use. So a really amazing example of very early STEM used by Aborigines. Now, according to Aboriginal tradition, the ancestral creation being, which is Bayami, created the design by throwing his net over the river, and with his two sons, he built the fish traps to its shape. But according to oral history, the fish traps and the technology behind them were inspired by nature. And if you have a look at the image there, you can almost see it's in the shape of like a pelican bill. So it works by trapping and acting as the pelican's beak does to scoop fish out of the water. So it's a really complex science and technology structure at work. And many Australians don't even know that these fish traps exist or much less how they work. So it's a really good starting point to get us thinking about the content of tonight's session. Okay, so just a reminder, I'm sure most of you are quite confident now about how PD in Your Pocket works, but just a reminder that you would have already received a resource booklet that was sent to you. If you haven't read it already, we really encourage you to do so. It gives you some great background information. And if you haven't been sent it, you can access that from the link there on your screen. So have a click, have a read, and you can download that one to keep. Again, we will also be sending you the further readings, which will come after tonight's session. And of course, our Facebook page, which has been proven very popular. It's got some great content and really wonderful to see that as we go through the sessions, educators are sharing more and more on that page. And it's a fantastic example of what's happening in the services as we go through each topic. And we see some really good practical examples there. So thank you so much to everyone who has been contributing to that Facebook page. And please, if you haven't done so already, go and have a look and, contribute and keep the conversation going. You're also going to get a survey, and it's really important that you complete this. We really appreciate your feedback, and it's important too so that we can show the department that PD in Your Pocket is valuable to all of you family daycare educators. And with that feedback, hopefully we can keep it going. So unfortunately, the sad news is that tonight is the last topic of our series. So it's our last session tonight. But some exciting news is that this Saturday we will be hosting our Educators PD in Your Pocket conference. Now, this is a free event. Some of you may have already heard of it, and some of you may already be registered. If you're not yet registered, please go jump onto the website and you can do that. So that's this Saturday, the 20th of November, starting at 9:15. It's done over Zoom, and it's just for the morning. So we should be all wrapped up by 1 p.m. at the latest. So it's just a nice half day, jam-packed with great sessions. We've got a keynote speaker and some different sessions which you can choose from. So please jump on and register if you haven't done so already. And all the details are also up on the PD in Your Pocket webpage. So although it's our last session tonight, we really hope to see you all on Saturday for our conference. Okay, so let's have a look at what we're covering tonight. So we're looking at STEM. Obviously, what is STEM, how we can incorporate STEM into our program as family daycare educators, the role of the educator in STEM. So what is our role when we're teaching children about that, and the importance of the right question. So it's not just about asking questions, but make sure we're asking the right ones, because that really then leads into great conversation all around STEM. So that's a bit about what we're covering tonight. Okay, so the first topic for tonight, what is STEM? So for STEM, STEM really stands for science, technology, engineering, and maths. And you're probably already doing a lot of these areas in your curriculum with the children as a family daycare educator. So you may find that as we go through this evening, you might pick up on a lot of things that you're already doing. But we also hope to promote and inspire to expand what you're currently doing and give you lots of great ideas on what you could increase or do more of. So thinking of them and engaging with them as a block rather than as individual disciplines helps you understand that the questioning and skill set that they all require cross over each other. And that's why we look at them as a whole, as STEM as a whole, as opposed to these separate elements. They all are very intertwined in each other, and the different disciplines can be taught together with great ease. So they're a good thing to bundle up together. One of the definitions of STEM that we most like is that STEM is an approach to learning where there is no wrong answer. So just an opportunity to learn something new. And you'll find that as we go through some different examples, you'll see that it's all about exploring and experimenting and finding out information. So it's not so much about wrong or right. It's about really opening our minds and having a look at what is there for us to learn. So let's have a look at each of these components in a bit more detail. Now, this slide also describes STEM and each of the components really well by just using some simple vocabulary that we're familiar with. So you can have a look at each of those terms and the vocabulary under each one. So for science, we look at the process of finding out about the world and how it works by exploring, gathering data, looking for relationships and patterns, and generating explanations and ideas using evidence. When we talk about technology, we're looking at the tools that have been designed to meet human needs, such as balancing scales to compare weights, lenses to look closely at living things, and digital tools like computers and tablets, which are now quite mainstream in ECEC settings. So I'm sure in your family daycare service you will have some kind of technology to expose children. There are quite detailed guidelines on screen time. So if you are using tablets or computers or any kind of technology, take that into consideration. But it's certainly encouraged as part of our curriculum and part of our daily program now is to expose children to modern technology. Now, engineering, so that's the process of designing tools, systems, and structures that help humans meet their needs or solve problems. And mathematics is the study of quantity, so that's all about looking at how much, structures, so shapes, space, angles, distances, and change. So anything where numbers are occurring or you're doing mathematical equations, that's where we look at math. Okay, so just to give you some background too of why we need to incorporate STEM. It's quite important. It links back to a lot of our fundamental documents that guide our practice as educators. So like the EYLF and the My Time, Our Place outcomes, we can see STEM coming through those as well. And it's a requirement there of those learning frameworks. The early years are also the best time to approach such a complex topic. And a lot of educators, they might get a bit nervous around STEM if they're not quite familiar or if they don't have an understanding of it themselves. But also they might feel that it's quite a complex topic for children to be exploring. But we know that the early years are the time that human brains are best wired to learn some of the STEM concepts, especially the mathematical ones. So don't be afraid to really challenge the children's thinking and cover these topics. When the children you are now educating grow up, many jobs will exist around STEM industries. So when children have access to and engage in STEM activities, this gives them skills for life for any workplace, which is a great starting point. And finally, our country needs more children to love STEM subjects and feel confident about their ability to succeed in them. Research shows that if children are exposed to these subjects in the early years, they become confident in them and their confidence continues through their school years. So it is, research is showing that children are not always choosing to study STEM subjects in the later years of school. And it may be because they were lacking that initial fundamental understanding of it. So by starting in these early years, you're really getting children off to a great start in this subject. Okay, so now we've got that understanding, let's look closely now at doing STEM as a family daycare educator and what that involves. We're really lucky tonight because we don't just have one but two videos. So we were told about a family daycare educator who is doing a lot of really interesting STEM activities. And her name is Louise Reid, and she's a family daycare educator from Queensland. So Lisa Bryant caught up with her, and I'm now going to play the video of the interview for you. So I hope you enjoy that, and we'll see you back shortly.
Hello and welcome to PD in a Pocket. I'm really excited because today we've got two interviews for you today, but this particular one is with an educator, a family daycare educator. So one of you guys. And I always get excited when we can get an educator on. So I'd like you to welcome Lou Reid.
Hi, Lisa. Nice to actually meet you. And it's lovely to have been put forward by, that amazing group.
Yeah, it was Little Scientists that put you on to me.
I've done a little bit of work with them on a Bush Tucker webinar.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Okay, so look, what got you as an educator into wanting to do STEM activities with children?
I guess first and foremost, having been quite creative myself, I've done some interior design study and fine arts amongst a few other things. So I just believe that children have, innate ability to want to learn, and they have, vast amount of interest in the environment, in their world. So they have an innate ability to learn and discover, and that's sort of the reason. Because I've been in the industry a long time, I also wanted to try and step out of the box a little bit, use a lot of raw materials, because they're always connecting to STEM themselves. If you look at, how parts of nature are structured, there's a reason why they are. And it was about also being able to show children real life things to connect them to what they're learning. So yeah, just I mean, my attitude is that they can absorb so much more than many of us think that they can. So I just try and open up that field as much as I can.
I think that's a really good way to go. And I agree with you. They can absorb a lot more, and they can ask really intelligent questions.
Oh, yeah. I've got a few good questions I could share with you.
What happens if you don't know the answers? Do you become a co-researcher and help them find out?
Absolutely, on the spot.
Yeah.
So I'll example of that quickly. When we were doing shapes recently, because mine just, I've got 3 that were going to prep this year, so mine already know all the basic shapes. So we do more like the complex shapes, like dodecagon and pentagon. And one day a little fella said to me, "What's a 10-sided shape, Louise?" And I said, "Oh, well, I don't know. Let's have a little look." So we Googled it. So we found 2 new shapes, and one was a dodecagon. And we learnt about that, and it was a member of the pentagon and hexagon family. They collected natural objects to glue onto it, and it was just absolutely beautiful. And then we launched into make up all my own songs as well. So I resurrected the shape song, and then we went out into the environment. So just connecting that with the STEM, going to the environment, and can we find a hexagon? Because I've got lots of old nests, we connected that with some of the bees' nests that I'd connected, wasp nests I've connected over the years. Like, because I've just moved, I've got so many resources in the shed. I could have just showed everyone how I do things. Like, I guess there's an example here, a seed pod to one of my little people. It's got like little circles and ovals in it. So for a younger one, because I did have one 2-year-old, then I would show her a physical example of what a oval is or a circle, opposed to just doing it on a piece of paper, because that's how children learn. They want to feel and touch. I mean, sometimes even lick things, so
of course.
That's how I actually always do things. Or like it says, I think sometimes we overthink things. Another example would be when we did dinosaur dig with bones and medical centre, we learn about bones. Like, it's as simple as looking at the bone. What sort of shape is that? But why is there a shape like that? So it's more asking those questions, not ever making an assumption and overlooking little things, because little things to us are not little things to children. And if we explore them a bit more, they're definitely not little things to us. So
okay, so shapes is one STEM activity that you've done with your children. What are some others that you've done recently, or some that you think worked really well?
Yeah, I guess, well, I hadn't done dinosaurs for about a year, so we did dinosaurs. So, and a lot of people do the volcanoes, but what I wanted to do was, research specifically right on the spot with them, because I wanted to teach them just by using a little bit of technology, you can find out things. So it was just the basic, taught them the basic action of the bicarb interacting with the vinegar and causing a acid reaction, which is the same thing that happens in a soft drink bottle. That's a great way of explaining it to a child. So explaining it, that's how volcanoes erupt. which thus helped make some of the dinosaurs became extinct. So, and continuing on from that, I've got a lot of volcanic rock, so which is just pumice stone, which a lot of people may not know. So that's been collected on the beaches here. So I've got lots of big, and I tried to find them, but they're packed away. So big pumice rocks, and just a simple STEM activity is putting them in water, and you know, they're light, then they become heavier because they absorb the water. Why do they sink? You know, so it's just as simple as one little activity
lead into
flow over into another. So then they sank, and then from there setting up a beautiful water theme, you know, and filling up big queen palm fronds and adding shells. And I've got beautiful ones I painted myself, and I forgot to get them down for you. So lots of different ways to extend on those things. Yeah, so that was one. Another medical, when we did medical centre, and a lot of my learning overlaps is learning about the human body. So I teach them how babies are really born, you know, obviously with permission from the parents and things like that. And then looking at bones again, why do they have holes in them? You know, they were alive once. What function did they have for us? Because if the child, then that's how they learn to count. The steppers on the way in, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but having a little group of knuckle bones where they sign in on the board, counting them, looking at the little holes, why they got holes, what function do those holes have? So it's just maybe, I think it's looking at every single object in nature that the question is what purpose did that serve? And having the respect to teach a child, not making an assumption that that's not important, because that's probably one of the most important things you can teach a child. What is the object for? Why is it like that? Yeah.
So it's important to foster their curiosity.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, yeah. Yeah. And, you know, another example is just a bark on a tree. That can be connected to the medical centre, you know. Why does a tree have bark? Take them to a park, you know, perhaps there's been a tree that has had one of its branches cut off, and you can see the growth rings, you know. Connecting with medical centre, why do we have skin? What's its function? How many layers? And you can break it down really easily for a child, you know. Look, you've got a little scratch there, so you've exposed your skin. You know, why is it important to cover it with a Band-Aid? Because how often do we do a washing hands song, which teaches them about germs? And I've made up lots of those too. So they're seeing real life. Why have I got skin? Most children come in and show you all their sores they've got. You know, don't break the skin or protect the skin if you do. And that's the function of a tree. That why do we have to respect a tree? Why do we have to respect a plant? Because they have protection mechanisms as well. So it's just breaking those little things down. And like STEM is everywhere. And then the child wants to know more. I mean, that's I guess where Lucas's question from what's a 10-sided shape, because he was just so bored with pentagon and hexagons, he wanted to know a little bit more, you know. So and that's just like, I guess, a normal part of my day. Sorry, I've got a dog.
That's okay.
In the background, if you hear all these gnarly noises.
Okay, so what about resources? Like, what resources do you think educators need to have to do STEM activities with children in their services?
I think they don't need to buy really expensive pieces, but I mean, I guess if they do and they want to put their money into something, then you can always add to it yourself. I think that it's maybe you can go for a walk along the beach or a park. Just, I mean, I guess with national parks, you've got to be careful. If it's a national park, you're not supposed to remove objects, but finding things in nature, like it's as simple as things like that I've collected. When I use little tiny peg dolls, I mean, some of these I've made, that's their their bed. So they don't cost you anything. And scrap pieces of material, and a child just wrapping that material around this peg doll and putting it in that hole. And they're just, I think it's important to like have aesthetically beautiful tactile objects, because children always want to know more. Another example is a piece of bark. Don't throw it out. Like, that's another little home for your dolls. And all these I made myself. You just go and buy the dolls. I mean, that was a activity about people from different countries, why they have dark skin, why we have light skin. Once again, you know, there's a bed for that baby, and that bed is far more stimulating to a child than a man-made object. So I think going to your landscaping supplies and just buying a couple of rocks, pieces of wood, a handful of stones, because they are far more fun, I guess, for a child to count. But then if you want to add a STEM activity, where did the stone come from and how was it made? It's so easy to teach. You know, you just jump on Google or DuckDuckGo, whatever search engine you use, and Google why. I mean, another example, that's a rainforest snail. And recently I moved, but I live near the rainforest. We just walk along and they would be out on the outskirts, just not live ones. We would never collect live ones, but that's how we taught the child about a spiral when we did patterns. So yeah, just really get out in nature and don't overlook anything. Like, I used to ride my push bike, and if any of the paper bark would fall off the melaleucas, I'd pick it up and use it as a mat in a display, and it's just so beautiful. And when you use lots of natural resources, children do learn to respect them. They explore them, but they don't like pull them apart. They know, they learn that to respect it, you know, because it's a natural object often, I think. Yeah, so
what about, you've spoken a lot about science activities. What about the mathematics component of STEM?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure if I'm addressing this correctly, but when I've done like a science experiment, say looking at bones, we might I'll incorporate an activity where the child, we might be doing, you know, 1 + 1 or 5 + 10, you know, some of them love maths, but I'd use like a knuckle bone. We'd give the parents activities, you know, if you eat meat, if you save the knuckle bones and dry it out, that's a science activity you can do at home with the child, you know. Like, it sounds a bit gruesome, but that's the real world, you know. If you want to teach them that, why does the knuckle bone have a tendon on it? Why doesn't it? Then you bring it in, and they're more inclined to use those to count. So I've got like a whole container full that I've collected over the years, and that's how they learn to count. So that's how I incorporate maths. But you could sort of, when we did shapes, we went out, and at that last house I had lots of banana palms, and we'd find like a row of dots that a caterpillar had eaten through, and that's how we'd count all the dots. But then again, on the spot, you can say, wonder why these dots are here. Can we find the caterpillar and quickly research what species, you know, or how come those dots are all in a row? How far apart are they? Like, I had children bringing in their tape measures as well. So when you open up that little can of worms, basically, they start to do it themselves, and it's actually really, really exciting. Yeah, so all those sorts.
Okay, so is there one thing you'd like to tell the educators, you know, listening about how much fun STEM can be?
I think what I feel that with all programming, like some of my programming, you know, I guess with the pictures looks complicated, but when you just start with one small activity, what is the child interested in? Say you're doing the life cycle of a butterfly, you know, you could do your social emotional scene with that, but then what can you teach them? What, you know, what is metamorphosis? Why does it happen? You know, just pick one object, whether it's science, maths, technology, engineering, out of it. You know, like engineering, what's the process of metamorphosis? You know, how does that happen? You know, so I guess, and just break that down for the child, because then they're more inclined to respect the butterfly that comes out and spends a couple of hours drying its wings. You know, they're not going to want to touch it because it might damage the wings. So just, I think my best advice would be to pick one thing and not overcomplicate it. And then the educator would realise how easy that might work.
I think that's brilliant advice.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for sharing your time with us today. And
my absolute pleasure.
And thank you also for sharing your photos. Some of the photos that you'll see in this session, people, are photos of Mari's practice. Sorry, Louise's practice.
Okay.
I don't know why I suddenly got Mari.
That's all right. And feel free to share the link to my page, even with any educators that wants to join it, my Facebook page.
That's a good idea. I'll put it up in the Facebook page we have for PD in a Pocket. That would be wonderful.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. That was fantastic. It was so good to hear all of Louise's advice and her experiences. As Lisa said, she's also shared with us some fantastic images, which I'm going to go through now. And we're just going to have a bit of a chat about how they relate to STEM. So these are a lot of her STEM activities that she's done with her children at her family daycare service. And some of them are in the booklet, but we'll look through all of them now. Here we can see recycled materials being used for loose part play, and there's a combination of natural and synthetic materials there. So the children could have done some counting with these, exploring the difference between natural and man-made materials. I mean, just looking at this as an educator, I can see that the opportunities here are endless. So this is a fantastic starting point to look at that as well. Okay, the next photo here. So we've got an image. She was doing creating planets in a creative way. So making paper mache planets to educate children about the solar system, but really honing in on their creativity as well and their creative skills. Again, she's using a combination of natural and synthetic materials. There's a bit of an example there in the imagery of the planets behind them. So that's some scaffolding, another fantastic example. And along with this creative experience, you'd want to be providing some background information on the planets and as much detail as you can give the children. Don't be afraid to provide them lots of factual information. And you could get the children involved in the researching side as well. So we want to learn about planets. Let's get the children to do their own research on that. Okay, again, this is a bit of an example of small world play on a subject relating to technology. There's some engineering there, some science, and during the play, a discussion could be had around rockets and space, asking children lots of questions while they are playing. So it's targeting the child's interest, something that children love to do through small world play. But we'll also have a look later about what role the educator can play, and focusing on especially asking questions, because as I said before, questions really spark all that discovery and research and inquiry with the children. And Louise gave some great examples there about, you know, using natural materials with some dolls. I remember she made some doll beds out of some natural materials. So this is another example of small world play, using lots of great resources there, and also touching on other subjects like cultural awareness. Here we've got the life cycle of a butterfly. So this is a learning table exploring that life cycle, and children are free to explore and interact with the resources. So it's very open-ended. The children are given that freedom to explore things as they like. And you could also have some diagrams up about different life cycles to connect in with those resources. Again here, so this learning table, there's a magnifying glass, and they're a great piece of technology. They're easy for children to use independently, and children can utilize them to explore things on a smaller scale and get really into understanding different textures or different materials, especially things that they haven't seen before, like some of these seed pods or natural materials, the shells, rather than just kind of skimming over things that are put in front of them. The magnifying glass gives an opportunity for the child to look at more detail and really take their time with different things. And I can see there too, Louise has got on her chalkboard exploring the concept of vessels. So different things holding different materials and what they're capable of. Okay, so here we've got bones. Children can learn about human anatomy through provocation. So there's a great book there that's acting as a provocation, really scaffolding the child's learning. And then the children are engaged and interacted with those hands-on materials like the bones and the skeleton there. So really another nice open-ended experience for children. And again, they can do their research, they can learn through the images and the books, while also having that hands-on learning. Got some more images here of the caterpillars. Again, lovely combination of recycled man-made materials with the natural materials, nice open-ended. There's creativity there. They can do counting, looking at things that are hollow, looking at things that fit, that don't fit. There's so much we can do there. And this next one, another nature-based science activity. So we've got the shells and the seed pods, using unusual objects as counting props as well. So the children could be counting how many shells there are, how many seed pods, all based on natural science. So there's a nice connection there. And I did mention before how it's very hard to separate the STEM concepts from each other, and that's why we often look at them as a whole. Now, anything with water, we can always look at the concepts of sinking and floating. Again, there's nature here, so looking at those sea creatures. And, you know, it's a nice balance of whether you're guiding the learning, whether it's quite intentional and you've got something that you want to teach the children in particular, or if you're letting them explore and discover by themselves, learning, okay, the plastic creatures might float and the rocks might sink. Now, another image from Louise here. This is her Play-Doh table, and she's looking at different natural materials. So taking a simple everyday experience that we do with Play-Doh and really jazzing it up, looking at different looking at STEM through the experience of diverse materials, natural materials. She's got some people there of different skin tone, and it's a nice way for children to do sorting and classifying, which is a big part of STEM. So you've got multiple numbers of the same types of material, so children can sort and count and classify those things, which are great concepts and topics. And bush medicine, which Louise spoke a bit about how she incorporates that into her program and learning. And medicines also relate to science, and children can learn about natural medicines and natural remedies, where those things come from. Okay, so fantastic ideas. Louise was very generous sharing her time and her pictures with us, and I hope that's really inspired you to give some thought about what you could be doing. And as she said, so much of this is free, it's in nature, and we've just got to think outside the box a bit and go, okay, how can we incorporate this into our program, but also how does it relate back to STEM? Because you'll find that once you get thinking about STEM, almost everything you can relate back to it, whether it be through the counting or the science, the maths, everything, your block corner construction, that's all engineering, so much technology, which we know these days. So once you get going, you'll find that the opportunities are endless, and it doesn't require lots of expensive materials. A lot of it you'll already have. It's just about changing the way you think and incorporating it as much as possible. Okay, so the next thing we're going to look at is the role of the educator. So what's your role in STEM and in implementing that at your service? So once you notice a child's interest once you notice that the children are interested in STEM, you can then provide materials and help them set up inquiries to explore interests. So let's say you've noticed a child is rolling a ball down a ramp. How can you then extend on that and turn it into an experiment? Can you try rolling several things down the ramp as a group? And if the child asks why a ball rolls and a box doesn't, then why don't you suggest exploring what happens and then researching and answering together? So you don't have to know the answers to STEM. The best part of this is you as the educator can be on that learning journey with the child. If a child asks you a different question, or a difficult question, rather than, not being sure, go on that learning journey with them and really experiment, research, find out. Educators can also help children build language skills. So every day when they ask questions, you can facilitate that conversation. So as they engage in STEM activities, children do what scientists and engineers do. They observe, they investigate, they ask questions, they measure, design and build. As they do, they can use the same vocabulary that scientists and engineers use. So educators can facilitate this language development by integrating STEM vocabulary into daily interactions with children. So another thing that educators can do, we can provide a label for children's actions. So explain to them exactly what they're doing. Point out to them when children make observations or predictions, when they collaborate, discuss, design, plan, investigate, they construct, they explain, they use their senses, they problem solve and communicate. So, for example, you could say, Josh, I noticed that you were carefully watching and observing how the ball rolls down the ramp, or Indra has designed a wide ramp. Let's see what happens when we roll lots of balls down at the same time. So take what they're doing and go with it, and let them know we're actually experimenting right now, or you're asking really great questions. So on the slide there, there's a summary of the different roles educators can take with STEM. So things we spoke about: noticing the children's interests, questioning what they're doing, provide materials, so that goes back to the scaffolding, and really, those provocations. If they're interested in bones, then make sure they have all the materials they need to explore that topic. Setting up inquiries, encouraging children to try different ideas, role modelling, assisting children in research, help children conduct experiments, and provide children with STEM language. So make sure that you're using that vocabulary to teach them. Okay, so the importance of asking the right question. So the questions that an educator asks of children are always important, but perhaps never more than in STEM areas. We want to be using open-ended questions to guide children's explorations. What and how questions can encourage deeper thinking, thoughtful answers, and continued exploration. So model how to ask questions. Scientists, engineers, and mathematicians all ask questions. So encourage children to become expert question askers by modeling your own thoughts and questions. So for example, is the pen going to roll or slide? Or I wonder if the rock will float or sink. So you need to role model those effective questions for the children to then learn. And make sure you respond to children's ideas and suggestions with questions that will extend the learning. So for example, say, oh, that's a really interesting idea. How can we test that out? So don't jump too far forward. Let them guide the learning. And then if they really get stuck and they need guidance, you can step in. But see if they can start thinking about experiments and different ways of learning themselves. And lastly, responding with questions encourages further inquiry by children and develops their critical thinking skills. So don't always answer straight away with the answer. Answer with another question. Get them really thinking and get that process of learning going. Now, let's look at some examples of the right questions to be asking. So what are the right questions? Now, there's some great starting points here on the slide. So you can see we have, I wonder if, what could we do? Can you find a way to? What would happen if? What happened there? What do you think that happened? What did you try? What did you notice about? Or tell me about? Or what have you seen other people trying? What do you think would happen if? And what do you think will happen next? So these are some great starting points. Now ask questions to remind children what they already know and then what they expect might happen during the activity. So all of these questions are open-ended questions. Children can't answer these with a yes or a no. So it requires them to think a lot more and go into more detail when they're explaining. They are also not just questions about that begin with the word why, because these can suggest that there is one correct answer that an educator is trying to get a child to find. So when you are asking questions, just be mindful that you're not going too heavy on the why questions, because it insinuates that there's one definitive answer that you're looking for. Whereas these kinds of examples on the slide, the what could and can you find and what would happen if, they could have multiple answers. So it's encouraging the children that their thought process is unique and it is potentially the correct process of thinking, that there's lots of different ways to think. All right, so let's have a look now at some STEM activities. So you can do an internet search on STEM activities and you'll find many ideas. There were many in Louise's photos that we looked at, and there are many in the links that we will send you in the further readings flyer. So make sure you keep an eye out for that and follow up tonight's session by going through those further readings. As you explore, look for activities and materials that give children opportunities to find out how things work. So to observe, explore, ask questions, solve problems, design, collaborate, build, and think critically. Offer activities and materials that encourage children to explore with their minds and senses. So, for example, you could set up a bowl of water for sinking and floating investigations. And children can sort, count, and compare the characteristics of items that sank and items that floated. So get them to do recording as well, because then after the experience, you can actually revisit it several times. We know that repetition is very important, especially when introducing new concepts. So make sure that you record what happened. And another really fun thing to do is to ask the children before the experiment or the activity about what they think is going to happen, and then record what actually happened. And then you can go back with the children and do a comparison and see if they were correct. Offer activities and materials that encourage children to explore with their minds and senses. Use your block area for developing children's maths and engineering. So we all have access to building or block material, and that's a key element of engineering skills. And you can invite them to build structures and notice the material size and shapes that make their structures sturdy. So not being afraid to let things collapse, or building them in an unstable way, just to see what happens, or experimenting with different size blocks. That's really going to test their knowledge on balance. Offer activities that delight children's interests so that they will participate actively and talk about what they are thinking about and doing. So if you do know that the children have a particular interest, go with that. Use that as your starting point, and then from there expand the 4 STEM concepts. And an example of that would be like if they were really interested in those shells and seed pods, then seed pods, use them as counters if you want to do some teaching of mathematics. Use the outdoor environment as well as the indoor environment. So STEM is absolutely able to be taught in both indoors and outdoors. Do experiments, for example, on planting seeds in different areas of the garden. So whether plants thrive in the shade, or whether plants thrive in the sun, or whether you have different plants that need different environments, different amounts of water. That's a really great experiment because it's ongoing. It goes on for quite a while, and it teaches children about the differences of plants that they may not have thought of. They may be quite comfortable and enjoy gardening, but they may not have thought of the different needs of different plants. So planning your STEM activity. So when you set up a STEM activity, think about what STEM concepts you want the children to learn during the activity. Think about what STEM vocabulary you can integrate into the activity, what open-ended questions you will ask children as they are exploring, and how will you ask children to reflect, and how will you or the children record your findings. So make sure going into a STEM activity, you do give some time to pre-planning. It'll just make the experience flow a bit better. It'll make sure that you're comfortable with it and that you know what it is that you want to get out of it. Of course, there's always elements of spontaneity where experiments might not go to plan, or you actually learn something that you weren't expecting, or things, go left of field, and that's absolutely fine. But it is a good idea to start with a basic plan. So look at what vocabulary do I want to include, what concepts, so out of the 4 STEM concepts, which ones do I want to include, or am I covering all of them? What questions am I going to ask? So I'm going to have a hypothesis to this experiment, and what it is that I want the children to get out of it. And then, of course, recording your findings as part of your documentation. And finally, let's have a look at STEM and the other PD in your pocket topics. So hopefully you've been able to make several of our different topics over the series, and we can see STEM making its way into all different areas. So let's think back to the topics we have done through PD in your pocket. we had a session on play. So remember Marilyn Fleer's play worlds. A lot of the exploration of these worlds are science explorations. And we also saw some examples today of that small world play where the children are playing, with the spaceship or with the little homes, that a lot of that can relate back to science. We also had a session on art. So art is about creativity, but it can also be about science. So the mixing of colours or maths, the proportions of each colour, so mixing different colours together to make new colours. And some people even think that the acronym for STEM should be STEAM to include art. So having that A in there. So some people do believe that art does belong in the sciences. So you can definitely find links there to art. We also had a session on culture. So there's a million different ways that Aboriginal culture can be mixed with a STEM curriculum. We had that great example at the beginning with the catching of the fish in the Bayami Nunus. And that's definitely a great example of technology that was developed tens of thousands of years ago to that specific culture. And science, sustainability is all about science. And finally, provocation. So our previous session before this one, provocations can be about science or technology or engineering or maths. And we've seen a couple of different examples of provocations this evening. So a really nice point there to go back and see how STEM can link back to our previous sessions. Okay, so we're now going to move on to our second interview. This is Lisa Bryant. She's interviewing Lena Hammond, the head trainer from Little Scientists. And then after the interview, we will go on to our question time. So I will play this for you now. Please enjoy it. And if you do think of any questions, you're very welcome to put them into the chat box, and we will have some answers ready to go for when we come back together. Otherwise, we'll have time for questions after the video.
Hello, welcome to this edition of PD in a Pocket. I'm really excited to have with me today Lena Hammond from Little Scientists. Hello, Lena. How are you?
Hello. I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. So tell me a bit about your background with, STEM concepts and early education.
Yeah, sure. So my background is in science and in particular in environmental education. I'm a head trainer with Little Scientists now, and I've been working with them for the past 4 years. And my role is to teach both educators and also to train trainers in these STEM concepts and how to facilitate STEM learning in an early learning service, or we actually also go through to primary school as well. But I was thinking a little bit about this earlier. I had a experience when I was really little, when I was about 5 or 6, and I went on a bushwalk with my family, and we walked across a little stream, and I was following my parents and my brother across the stream, and I looked down, and as I looked down, I noticed some movement in the water, and I bent down, and it happened to be a tiny little a freshwater tortoise, and I picked it up. I wouldn't do that now, but I picked it up and I popped it in my hand. And even as a 5-year-old, it just sat in the little tiny palm of my hand. It was so small, must have been about the size of a 20-cent piece. And I thought, that kind of experience as a child really stuck with me and really helped influence how I moved into science and environmental education. And, that's one of the reasons I love this area, helping educators find joy in STEM and how to, implement STEM with their children, because that early childhood experience is just so formative and can really help form those attitudes that follow you through life.
Tell me, did it survive? Did your parents tell you to put it back?
Yes, no, it picked up, said hello, and put it back in the stream, and hopefully it lived a long and happy life.
That's great. So like that's one of the reasons why early childhood is such a good time to learn about STEM, because it creates that passion that obviously people like you have. But why else is early education such a good period of a child's life to introduce? Yeah. First of all, can you just talk about like why STEM? Why is science linked with engineering and maths and things? And then do they talk about why it's an important period?
Yeah, sure. It's interesting because this word STEM is thrown about left, right, and centre these days, and people have this vague idea of what it is, and they know it's science and technology, engineering, maths, but the term STEM is thrown out there, and I think it's really important to try and tease apart what they are to make more sense for our understanding of how they interact with our daily lives and also for children. So if we think about science, we're really talking about systematically observing the world around us and what that means. We're talking about technology. Well, we're not simply talking about digital technology. We're talking about tools and how tools help us. So it could be simply a fork, and how technology improves and develops over time. When we're talking about engineering, we're talking about using what we've discovered about the natural world around us. So, for example, the forces of physics, and how we can use what we know about the natural world to solve different problems. So, I'll go back to the fork example. Talking about engineering. Do we want to eat our soup with a fork? Does it actually solve that problem? Not really, but a soup spoon does. And there are a whole different array of spoons as well. We could investigate what is the best spoon for eating a soup. Is it the ladle? Possibly not. Is it a teaspoon? Also possibly not. So this is a perfect activity as introducing the introduction of how technology and engineering works in an early childhood setting. I can go into that later. But yeah, and mathematics, of course, everyone knows mathematics, but really mathematics is about having a language to discuss the physical properties of the world around us. So I think that's really important. What is STEM? And teasing it apart like that. But also, that first question you said, why is it important in the early years? Well, I'm sure your educators would know that, those first 5 years are crucial for development. Our brains are undergoing huge changes, and being able to understand and implement the skills and the processes in science, technology, engineering, and maths, fundamentally at these early years, helps create neural pathways that can be continued to be built upon throughout their life. So I like to think about it and explain it like learning a language. When children are very young, they can learn 2 languages or 3, however many they're exposed to, and they can learn those languages and develop them without an accent. And it's very similar with STEM. If we give children the opportunity to immerse themselves and really massage these skills for science, technology, engineering, math in their everyday, we're creating a fluency in this STEM language, as it were. And it's also really important for creating positive learning dispositions that carry through to primary school and beyond. And I don't think that they're any less important than, learning that alphabet or basic maths to move into primary.
Sure. It also seems to me like children are just naturally born scientists. Like if the aim of science is to answer why, then that's children's very first question, Yep. What is this caterpillar doing here? Why does a caterpillar become a butterfly?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's exactly right. And I think sometimes our education system is very good at stamping that out of children, but really we want to massage and nurture that curiosity. And like I can think about it as a parent. I'm sure that I've done this before where my children have asked me a question and I've gone, I don't know, chew. But to throw the question back at the children and say, well, what do you think and what's your ideas and what do you know about this already, is so much more empowering to them, and really lets them know that their ideas are important and their questions are important. And yes, they should continue to ask questions and wonder about things around them, because we want them to continue to do that. And we want them to continue that right through to their adult lives. I think that a lot of us take how our brains work for granted, that we're really good problem solvers, but we need to use it. Our brains are just like our muscles, and if we stop using them, then those neural pathways will die off.
Sure. One of the things that is hard for, I think, some family daycare educators is if you're in a centre and you're not good at one thing, you can say to another educator, hey, can you do that? I'm really good at this, you're good at that, and divide it up. But in family daycare for family daycare educators, they've got to do everything. Now, I'm someone that's grown up thinking I'm crap at STEM stuff. Maths was just like, oh, forget it. Science was something that the nerdy kids did over there while me and the other literature kids read our books. So what do you say to an educator like me that's terrified of STEM concepts?
Yeah. It's really not uncommon. That's very, very common for me to hear with educators in our workshops. And strangely enough, would you believe it, I also was kind of one of those people in high school as well too. And there's two things I want to get across here. I'll start with one on the side, which is, why is it that you love what you do, and why was it that you love literature, and who was teaching you that kind of thing, and what kind of teacher were they? I have a very strong interest in history, and I can think back to my high school history teacher that just exuded Plato and Euripides, and she just provided so much fun and joy to learn that topic, and that's what I remember, whereas my high school math teacher was somewhat dry, to put it kindly. Now, so I think a lot of us had that experience in maths or in science, and really just couldn't get it, and there was not that enthusiasm that was shown by our teachers for us to pick up on. We're social creatures, and if you have a look at really young children, babies in particular, with their caregivers, if a dog comes up barking to them, they look to their caregiver first to say, well, what do I do? What's the situation here? Am I scared or am I okay? So we are social creatures. But for those educators who go, oh no, I can't do maths, I can't do STEM, one of the greatest things I can tell you is that actually you don't need to be a scientist, you don't need to be a mathematician or an engineer or a technologist. You don't have to have the answers, because we're not expecting you to be able to teach the children quantum theory or thermodynamics, and nor would we, I know, but nor would we expect you to understand that either, because at this stage we're actually wanting the children to understand the basic processes and the fundamental skills behind that. And one of the best ways to do that is to flip it and give it back to the children, like I said. So a child says to you, why is the snail moving over there? Well, what do you think's happening? And educators don't need to know the answer. And the best way for children to learn in a co-constructed environment is to learn alongside and with the children. So if you think, oh, I don't really know anything about, let's say, I don't know, what's a good activity? So water play. People love to jump into water play. Go, well, I don't know anything too much about that other than let's go outside and have fun. But really, introducing water play, you've got a lot of opportunities to talk about gravity and density, buoyancy and displacement. And, there...
See, I panic when you say those words, because I don't know why water runs downhill. I know that it does because I've seen it, but I don't know why.
Yeah, sure.
So how do I get over that fear? Like I'm going to say, oh no, what does that mean? I'm going to fail this exam.
Well, that's the great thing. There is no exam, and you don't need to know. So, you can be wondering alongside the children going, oh, wait, okay, so we're talking about observation skills here. We're pouring water into a funnel. Where's the water going? Okay, it's coming down here. Now it's splashed onto the floor, and an hour later it doesn't seem to be there anymore. What's happened? It's disappeared, it's evaporated. We can try challenging children, saying, well, can we make the water flow upwards? Can we try that? And there is no right or wrong. It's simply about what you were doing at the time and making those observations, and also wondering with the children. I love when educators come to our hands-on workshops and have those fun little joyful experiences where they find out something. I think I had a group once who'd made a bubble on a table, quite a big bubble, and were dropping toys into the bubble, expecting the bubble to pop, but the toys didn't, and they burst into laughter. This is such a rich experience for them, but this could be done alongside and with children as well. And it might not, I can't explain to you why in the scientific terms. I could try, but it actually doesn't matter. We can ask the children, what do you think is happening? And I've seen this done before where my daughter, she's a bit older, but she goes, oh, if I dip it in the bubble liquid, it's already got the liquid on it first, and she can pop it in, and the bubble won't break. So and I guess that that fear to overcome is partly, it's how you've been conditioned to go, oh my gosh, displacement, what are you talking about? But I encourage people to try and pick up scientific vocabulary and use it when they can, not necessarily to explain, but just to observe, because it's a really rich way of developing language, of course. But at the same time, children come up with some very colourful language themselves, which is another great way to develop language skills. And I'll just give you a really quick example of this. So when my daughter was about 18 or 20 months, we went on a boat ride on a little yacht, and she climbed down into the cabin of the yacht. It was quite warm, and she looked around, she goes, it's like an incubator in here. And my jaw just hit the deck. I was absolutely floored that she'd used this great big word. And not only had she used this word, big word, it was in the right context. She was absolutely right. And it took me a little while to work out how on earth where did that come from? And we'd been reading this book about Manakura, the white kiwi, who was raised in an incubator where it was nice and warm. And so she'd actually translated something that she'd been listening to, that we'd been reading over and over, and put it in the right context, which I found phenomenal. But the point is that when we can try and use our scientific language, what we know of it, in as much of everyday experiences as we can, the more it's able to be absorbed and used as a fluent language for children themselves.
For sure.
Yeah.
So what's the best way of introducing STEM concepts to children?
Yeah. So really our method, our big sign that we hold up is every day. Immersing children in STEM concepts every day through your everyday play. It doesn't require you to go and collect expensive STEM equipment or coding equipment or programs. Everything that you're doing currently, whether it's, for example, you're in the kitchen, you're going to bake some cookies today, or you're going to bake some muffins. Well, we've got a tray of 12 cookies and we have 4 children. How many cookies do each children get? And okay, wait, our other family daycare group's going to come and join us. 4 more children are going to come and get. So how many would we get now? And how do you know? And children can play with these ideas about equivalence and partitioning and quantities. And that's a perfectly wonderful mathematical experience that didn't require you to sit down and explain the Pythagoras theorem, for example. And again, so
I think I could do 12 cookies in the 4 children, maybe.
Yeah. It's introducing the concepts of thinking about it. And it's the same with we say for a technology, for example, people say, how do I introduce a technology experience? Well, let's look at the wheel, for example. It's on so many things. So let's go and find where are all the wheels in our service? Where can we find a wheel? And so we go and have a look on our trikes and our bikes and our scooters, and we might even find them as part of a set of, sets in the building block area, or potentially even within pulleys. And you might question, is the wheel a pulley or is it something else? And what is can we have a square wheel? Will that work? Can we have a triangle wheel? Will that work? And asking children to, okay, so that would be a technology experience. An everyday experience in engineering, for example, would be to pose a problem for the children that they need to solve. So, you know, like milk jugs, how they're just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And you try and pour a big 3-litre milk jug and milk spills everywhere and you've wasted your milk. So how can we better pour the milk? Can we have a smaller jug? Can we make a long handle? Is there a better way to catch the milk so it can be transferred into the bowl in a better way? And what's another experience I can tell you? Something coming up recently, a lot of people are starting to think about spring and planting gardens. And again, you know, we talk about, I think often educators do talk about the food that we eat and how we grow the food that we eat. So you can expand this a little bit more and say, well, you know, what is it that plants need to grow? Well, they need water and they need food and they need sunlight. But maybe you can also introduce some scientific experimentation here and say, well, let's plant one here and feed it milk. And we'll plant one and we'll feed that water, and we'll plant another one and we won't give it anything. And let's see which one grows the best. So you're starting to sort of design experiments. You can ask children to hypothesize which will grow the best. And also just watch that over time and document what's happening with those plants. Documentation is a really important part of science. And it's actually really helpful in programming as well, because your children are doing the documentation for their own learning, which is twofold. One, it's teaching them that documentation skill in science, and it's also giving you your resources to add to what they've learned today in your own documentation. What else?
I think they're all wonderful examples. What about if educators wanted to learn more about how to introduce STEM? Like, what does your organisation offer Little Scientists?
Yeah, so we have a whole host of hands-on workshops. Each of our workshops are based on a scientific concept, for example, water or optics or acoustics, but they also offer at the same time a pedagogical concept as well, such as language development or philosophical inquiry with children. So one of the great things I love about STEM, in particular in early childhood, is it does overlap very nicely with these pedagogical concepts as well. Our hands-on workshops run for full days, and educators can come in and really try from a child's perspective and also their own perspective, which really it helps to overcome that fear of, I don't know what I'm doing and I can't do that, because you just give it a try and you see what other people's learning dispositions are like. You know, are you somebody that stands back and watches what other people are doing? Do you dive right in and give it a go? So there's multiple opportunities, of course, in those workshops as well to share your knowledge with other educators and come away with lots of practical ideas and lots of resources. So those workshops are held around the country, all through New South Wales, when COVID is not, in our midst. That's right. But it seems like we're easing out of it. So I'd like to think that a lot of our face-to-face workshops will be back soon.
And there's also resources on your website.
Yes. So in the meantime, so whilst the hands-on workshops are on pause in some places, we do have introductory online workshops. We have our Inspire STEM workshops, which are a 2 or a 3-part series, and they cover different topics, but they also just introduce this concept of finding the STEM in the everyday and being able to implement that. We also have STEM Hour, which is a 1-hour webinar interview style where Heike, who's our training manager, interviews big scientists in different areas to see what relevance they have in early childhood and to draw concepts across from the broader community into early childhood. And there's also plenty of resources, like you said. So we have a whole list of books, literature links. So a lot of what we talk about, saying we can bring the STEM out in the everyday. One springboard is often literature and books. There's so many wonderful books out there. If you think about maybe like Mr. Archimedes' Bath or Who Sank the Boat, they're great springboards to take that into the water play and start talking about all those things like density and buoyancy and displacement. so there's those on the website, and there's also plenty of hands-on activities. And
okay, and the web address for those that want it is littlescientists.org.au. I encourage you all to go and have a look at that. Can we just finish with, I know that you have contact with some family daycare educators. Tell us about some of the great things that you've seen family daycare educators do in the STEM area.
Yeah, sure. So we've had some really interesting projects come through from family daycare. I came across a group that were grinding what do you call it? Different seeds, not seeds.
Spices.
No,
Spices.
not like wheat and oats.
Right. Grains.
Thank you, but they probably are seeds, but grains. Yeah, grinding different grains. How can you grind different grains and what textures come out of them? And it was just this exploration into, is a coffee grinder going to make things more fine than a mortar and pestle? Can we chop them? Can we, bash them with rocks? And there's not necessarily any grand outcome, but it was the process and the questioning that the children went into to get to that. Another experience is looking at different birds and how could we tell the boys from the girls when we're looking at a whole group of cockatoos on the ground. And they took this question and it was a single question: how can we tell the boys from the girls? And ended up following through with a diverse exploration into what is a bird? How can we tell what a bird is? What kind of beaks do they have? What kind of wings do they have? What kind of feet do they have? And they probably could tell me much more about cockatoos than I could possibly know myself now, which is really wonderful. And I also came across this wonderful group that had a snail home. And they created this snail home in the backyard, and snails kept escaping. So the first part of their project was trying to figure out how to make the snails not escape. And then they had a conversation about why the snails wanted to escape, and then decided that rather than trying to lock them in, they actually needed to create happy homes for the snails in different areas of the garden so they could visit them. So they'd gone from this, let's go and collect all the snails and, we'll just have them all here in our home, and then actually understanding what kind of habitat a snail needs. And being able to, encourage them to the garden rather than trap them in a little box.
They're wonderful examples, and I like them particularly because I can do those kind of things without my knowledge of STEM.
Well, that's right. You don't need to know about the answers. You can ask the questions, and you can wonder along with the children. And in fact, I love the word wonder. One of our educators, actually a few of them, keep a book or a wall of wonderings, because like you said at the beginning, children have so many questions, and it's so wonderful to continue to nurture those questions and just bring them out and see where they take you.
And that's a wonderful place to finish. So thank you very much for joining us, Lena. I really appreciate you giving us your expertise.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Okay, welcome back. So what a fantastic interview. That was a really great interview with Lena there about all her knowledge on science. So I hope you got a lot out of that. And while that interview was going, we had some great questions come through. So we will go through those together now. The first one was, how can we do STEM with babies or infants at 0 to 2 group, because it can be a quite a complex topic. But I think the key message to take away that we've learnt tonight is that we can simplify things. And I guess in that 0 to 2 age group, we're really just looking at wanting to develop STEM skills at a fundamental level. So looking at quite simple things, and you can do that through singing or play or talking, all those basic skills. And they're things that we're already doing with the babies on a regular basis. you can remember that at this young age, we're just wanting to commence exposing them to different concepts, to different vocabulary. So simply exposing them to the fundamental ideas, so that then as they grow and develop, they can take on those more complex, that complex knowledge. So think about things like counting, rhyming. I know a big thing that babies at 0 to 2 group love, and my toddler still loves this, is that cause and effect. So, throwing, what will happen if I throw my water bottle off the high chair? Does the lid pop off? Does the water go everywhere? Simple things like hide and seek, so when things are visible and when they're not, or hiding different items under a cloth, giving them objects of different shapes and textures. They're starting to explore and experiment with different things. So cause and effect is something that babies do every day. What happens if I do this? And they find out the results from themselves. So just keeping it, don't overcomplicate it for yourselves, especially with that young age group. You're simply wanting to expose them and start at that fundamental level. And then as they get older, they will certainly develop the ability to process the more complex information. Another great question we had come through is, can families be involved in the implementation of STEM? And absolutely they can, especially as family daycare educators. You have to remember that most of the things that you have in your home, the children will have in their home as well. So it's simply a matter of explaining and sharing with parents what you're doing, whether it's an experiment or a particular area of learning with resources that you're using. And most of the things that you have, they will have as well. And we've seen tonight that you don't need expensive purpose-made materials. I mean, you can certainly go and buy some things like some magnifying glasses or some special equipment, but so much of what we've seen tonight is inexpensive things around the house or things from nature, things that we already have. So it's just a case of explaining to the families what it is that you're doing and getting them to do it at home too. And if there are slight variations, maybe between the equipment you have and the equipment they have, their children might get different outcomes. So they can do the same experiment at home, but something different might happen. And how fantastic for them to then have the option to come back and share that with you as their educator and say, well, I did it at home with mum or dad or whoever, and actually something different happened. So it's just showing children, it's a really nice way of sending things home to do. So introducing those STEM concepts in the home environment with their parents or carers. And then again, seeing what happens, getting them to inquire, well, this was slightly different. So let families know whether it's something that you're doing in the kitchen or the garden or, with water, whatever it is, let them know and encourage them to do it at home too. And our last question for tonight, another great one was, what if the children don't seem so keen? What if it's not a topic that is grabbing their interest, or you kind of start to have a discussion around STEM and you seem to lose them a little bit? Well, the best place to start is focus on something that they are currently interested and go with that. So, if you've got children who are really in love with trains, then you can go down the path of teaching the difference between trains that run with steam and trains that run with electricity. And there you've got two very complex scientific approaches, but you're basing it on their interests. Or if your children love water play, then instigate concepts like floating and sinking with your water play. So take something that they're already interested in and then incorporate the STEM into that. And that way it's not going to be too overwhelming with them, and you can just naturally tie it into your program. If your children love cooking experiences, then start to introduce more complex vocabulary. So talk about measurements and weights and mixing and textures. You know, you've got your dry ingredients and your wet ingredients, and how many mils and how many grams, and getting children to see, you know, does 500 mils of oil weigh the same as 500 mils of water, or like, you know, different textures, different materials, just having those questions available so that you're doing the cooking experience that they love, but you're starting to introduce the science and the maths that they may not have been exposed to. So always start with a current interest. So thank you everyone for those great questions. It was another great interview by Lisa, and I hope you enjoyed that one. So that does bring us to the end of our session tonight. There's just a few more things to chat about before you leave us. Please remember that we'll be sending you the further readings after tonight, and these have all been hand-picked, so you get the really good stuff, and you can look out for these in your email. We'll also be sending your certificate for this evening in the next 3 to 5 business days, so you can have a look out for those as well. Also, you can participate in our Facebook group. If you haven't already, I mentioned this at the start of the session, open up Facebook and type in PD in your pocket, and you can join the page. And the great thing about that is that the Facebook page will continue even when PD in your pocket finishes. So tonight is the last session, but that Facebook page is going to keep going. So it's a great networking place, especially for family daycare educators who might not always get to communicate and network with other educators. So please use it. It's there for you to share. It's a great place to talk about what you're doing in relation to tonight's topic or any of the other sessions that we've had, and see what other people are doing. And don't forget to post your STEM activities. We really look forward to seeing those in the coming days or weeks as you start to implement them into your program. Please share them with us. We would love to see it. So a big thank you to everyone for participating in PD in Your Pocket. The series, the program, it's been fantastic. We have been getting over 1,000 educators in some of these sessions. So we want to really thank you for supporting the sessions. Without you, there would be no PD in Your Pocket. So thank you again so much, and we hope to see you all on Saturday. Thanks everybody. Have a great evening.